Right guys, I'll start your attention, go ready.
How about getting level?
Ready, move forward. Attention, go!
So we've been going about 2 minutes so far. There's only about 3.5 hours to 4 hours left to do. And we've chosen to scull at this relatively high rating of 26 strokes a minute in order to reduce the pressure on our hands. We've been going for 18 minutes now and my hands are getting warm. 20 minutes in and the other Nordic explorer is still keeping up with us, and I'm nervously looking over to the left to see when are they going to give up. My head is getting a little bit on the warm side. 25 minutes in and we've done 4 kilometers, so there's only 30 to go. Keith has the rate meter. The ETA is now 12:22 because we've picked up a bit of wind and the water's a bit popply, but it's not really rough enough to be slowing this down and making life difficult. And the other crew is still alongside us, the other Nordic explorer, and they don't seem to be going any slower than us or any faster than us. We're both at the hull speed. This is the point when we beat the other crew, because we kept rowing ahead with the two of us rowing for a few minutes longer than they did. And once we had that advantage, we never lost it and we gradually drew away. Meanwhile, the Monmouth School 8 has reached halfway at Foyers, and so has the quad from the University of London.
Well done, boys! Keep going!
Next to approach the halfway point was the coastal double of John Pilgrim and Stephen Andrews. But the University of London Tyrian quad nearly had a complete disaster, nearly ran aground at this point. No such problems for the coastal double, although they do seem to be having a little difficulty with the rough water because they don't have much freeboard and they're two big guys. Next to appear at Foyers, at the halfway point, was the Inverness Rowing Club Ladies Coxed Coastal Quad, who had plenty of freeboard and were not too heavy for the boat. The second Inverness women's squad came into the stage to change their cocks. And you can see that we are just in the distance. And this is where we snuck past them. It's beginning to get a bit choppy here because the wind is funneled between the mountains and speed picks up therefore, and so do the waves. And the loch is narrow here, although it opens up after this. But not before catching us out, just as it did with the University of London quad. Just as we approached the river that comes into the loch at this point, I felt my left blade touch the bottom of the loch. So we had to take avoiding action. Next to appear were Steve Fox and Glyn Reid in the other Nordic Explorer double. The first women's quad from Inverness seemed to be flagging somewhat at this point because we don't seem to be that far behind them. Now, we've been using the GPS to follow a straight line course right down the middle of the loch. Well, it's a big loch and that's taken us a long way from the shore at this point. So the photography's been really difficult for my camera team. And now we're approaching 24 kilometres and time for our second pit stop. And the Inverness girls are close enough inshore to get a really nice shot of their rowing. Now we're passing Urquhart Castle, which is a big draw for cruise ships. And so the big cruise ships that come into Invergordon, they offload lots of cruisers onto buses that bring them to little cruise ships like this and bring them all the way to Urquhart Castle. The problem that we had here was that there's a valley behind Urquhart Castle which is funneling wind down into the loch, and now we have wind coming from two directions, which means that the waves are coming from two directions, which means that sometimes they add together to make bigger waves, and sometimes they subtract from each other to make bigger troughs, and sometimes they cancel each other out. But it was quite difficult rowing in this water. Here are the Inverness First Ladies crew again, and we seem to be closing them down. Will we catch them up before we get to the end of the loch, or will we run out of loch in which to catch them? And the waves are getting bigger. Big enough to swamp the UL Tyrian crew, who nevertheless made it to the end in a decent time of 2 hours and 48 minutes, but not fast enough to break the record.
Low? Very low.
And if you're wondering what happened to the Monmouth School 8 that came to set a record, well, they sank a mile from the finish. Next to finish were Jonathan Pilgrim and Stephen Andrews in the Coastal Racing Double in a respectable time of 3 hours and 12 minutes. The Inverness Ladies Coxed Coastal Quad is next in a time of 3:38, and we're hot on their heels, but it looks like we've run out of loch in which to catch them. If only the loch had been just that little bit longer, I'm sure we could have caught them, but of course they would have gone a bit faster. As we got nearer to them, that's what happens. So our average speed over the 34 kilometres of the actual race was 9.27 kilometres per hour. But look at the maximum speed that we achieved going down some of these waves. 14.4 kilometres per hour. We were really glad of the help of racers who'd stay behind after they'd finished to help other people such as us. Up until this point we'd had absolutely no water in the boat, but now it's breaking over the stern and I got really upset. Steve Fox and Glyn Reed were only 7 minutes behind us after all that time.
Well done, guys.
The Inverness Women's Touring Quad were next in, only another 7 minutes later, in a time of 3 minutes 54, and they were the only other crew to get under 5 hours. Time for me to put on my obligatory high-vis kit, which at least is warm and dry. Well, you might think that Keith and I are completely bonkers taking this on, but here's a more bonkers person. These swimmers swim in Loch Ness every day without wetsuits. How crazy is that? Thankfully, after this adventure in the Nordic Explorer, we were driven back to Sharnonfield's new house for a lie down and a cup of tea before going to the pub.
Camera team. So show us your hands, Keith. And what were they like before?
Exactly the same.
Right.
Yes, yeah, they were like very liquid hands.
Yes, hands that do dishes.
Absolutely, just after I'd done a few dishes.
And mine are pretty much as good as normal. That's the other one. I've got a new blister here. But other than that, they're okay. Really.
No blisters from using the camera.
No camera.
No camera blisters. No.
Pointer blisters.
What do you mean
Pointer sisters, never mind.
The old ones are the best.
Meanwhile, the sea kayaker, Jimmy Riddle, finished in 5 hours and 16 minutes, while our friendly Viking David Golding only took another 5 minutes. But look at this. How about this for a feat of endurance, worthy of a wooden spoon? 6 hours and 32 minutes it took Fenwick Ridley and Stuart Creek to complete the paddle in their open Canadian canoe. Crikey, I bet they were creaking after that. And they didn't just finish. They went for a swim afterwards. Could this be the Loch Ness Monster? Well, I hope you enjoyed watching that video as much as I enjoyed monstering the Loch. But I'd like to see more Nordic explorers participating in the event next year, so please do share this with your friends.